pressure is high. Become data-driven or die. Everybody pretends to succeed, but you're not alone in your need. It's a long journey, and you might never arrive. Why this is okay, and how you should still strive. I wrote this short poem as a reflection about my own learnings over the past years. Everybody is stressing out. They all feel the urgency in becoming data-driven as soon as possible. Established businesses disappear, while unicorns disrupt the market and challenge all those well-established workflows. There's an hysteria in becoming data-driven and in changing as soon as possible and over a variety of all those different business areas all at the same time. I remember how frustrated I used to be attending events like these, listening to presentations like mine, where everybody else seemed to succeed so well while I was struggling so hard. This presentation is supposed to calm you down. I'm going to speak about my own mistakes and about how the general perception of everybody else succeeding tricks us into feeling bad. In the end, you're going to see that you're not alone and that you're not that much behind either. And hopefully, you will also have learned not to worry too much about Peter. But before we get there, let me start by introducing myself to you first. So my name is Tobias. I am born in Germany. I grew up in Spain, went back to Germany where I studied, and then finally migrated to Sweden in 2011, following the love of my life, like so many others have done it before me. Work-wise, I grew up in travel and hospitality. My dad used to work as a hotel director, so I literally grew up in hotels. And I spent over half my life working in that industry. I learned a lot about the eternal struggle of trying to make a rather conservative industry into a modern digital data-driven industry. Then, beginning of last year, I finally changed industries. I joined news media. I became part of Aftonbladet as head of data and analytics. And in hindsight, it was a good timing, considering how hard the hospitality and travel industry got hit by COVID-19 and all those travel restrictions. But let me speak to you first a little bit about Aftonbladet. A couple of words about those, about the company I'm working for. It's the biggest and most successful Swedish newspaper and was founded in 1830 by a guy called Lars Johan Hierta. And you can actually see over there, this is the first, hopefully you can see it, the first printed edition. 164 years later, in 1994, Aftonbladet took its first step from a printed to a digital newspaper by launching the first news website in Sweden. And just to put this into perspective, in the same year, 1994, also Microsoft, IBM, and Yahoo launched their first websites. So you can really call us early adopters. Fun fact, one of our first online articles was, what is this internet actually? Some of my colleagues still remember what kind of a struggle it was for them begging the print journalist for permission to put their articles online. That was 25 years ago, and many things have changed since that point. And I'm not only talking about clothing style. Today, Aftonbladet.se is read by more than 3.5 million people each and every day throughout all those different channels and devices that we offer. According to Amazon's Alexa, we are the number 10 most important website in Sweden, way before Expressen, but unfortunately behind Pornhub. Let's now talk a bit more about data, because this is why we're here today. And let's start with some rather intimidating numbers. I found this infographic on the web. It's called A Day in Data. So according to this source, every day we're sending almost 300 billion emails. So that's humanity. If I'm looking at my inbox, that surely seems realistic. Every day there are 500 million tweets being generated, probably half of them by Donald Trump. And then we have more than 3.5 billion searches on Google. Again, probably half of them how to block tweets by Donald Trump. At Aftonbladet, we generate 20 billion new events each day. That is 1 trillion data points and almost a terabyte of new data every single day. Isn't that insane? The amount of data is just exploding. I Google data. 11.5 trillion results. Fun fact, that is double the amount of results compared to Googling for sex. Have you ever imagined this? The only thing that makes me feeling good about this is that Googling for love still achieves higher results with around 15 trillion. Gartner predicts that by 2022, 90% of all corporate strategies will mention information as a critical enterprise asset and analytics as an essential competency. Let me now tell you a story about data and failure, because I was once responsible for making one of my previous companies data-driven. And to be honest, it was a complete disaster. So what has happened? Why did I fail? Well, the first point was IT tried to run a business project. And I was the guy in IT responsible for it. My task was to make us data-driven, but nobody knew what it actually meant to be data-driven. Technology and tools soon became more important than business processes. I've been to many of these conferences, got inspired by great speakers, and so many fantastic tools out on the market. We were still running a legacy data warehouse with a rather questionable quality on the data. And well, guess what? Data does not suddenly become cleaner just by using a different database or by using a fancier tool. Data was simply not yet part of our company DNA. And how could it have been? Our main business was not data, it was hospitality, hosting accommodation to people visiting our beautiful cities. Our business was about cleaning rooms, making beds, providing a relaxing experience, feeling a bit like home. The whole fact that the majority of data we were trying to analyze got generated by people manually typing keys on a keyboard in order to check people in or to generate a different invoice address, it was just not high enough on our agenda. I didn't have enough focus on the fact that it needed change management more than anything else to succeed, and all the skills along that line, and I tried to change too much at the same time as well. I created many PowerPoints, but I still communicated too little. We faced a lot of internal struggles as well. Since several business departments were fighting each other, everybody wanted to use their use case to be fixed first. I also lacked clear sponsorship by senior management, and I was not empowered enough either. The whole project had 7 different project owners just within 1 year. How it ended, you ask? Well, I left, and I think the project's still ongoing. When I rehearsed this presentation with my manager on the Aftonbladet, he said, well, Tobias, that's a good presentation, really good. But I just want to point out one thing, and you really need to bring this across. Make it clear that this is not Aftonbladet you're talking about. This is, some other company. Because at Aftonbladet, this could never happen, right? And I was like, yeah, well, why not? I mean, in the end, this could as well happen at Aftonbladet because it can happen everywhere. Sometimes you have to realize that in order to become data-driven, you need to first change your whole culture, company culture, and that takes a lot of time and energy. Many companies are not there yet, and it might still take decades for them to adapt. But why is that so? Why is it so hard for us to adapt? Well, in order to answer that, we have to put the whole development into a timeline and go back in time. We'll go back in time 250 years, actually. when humanity experienced a disruption that forced every single industry to change and to adapt to a complete new world. What I'm talking about? Oh well, the invention of the steam machine, which gave birth to the first industrial revolution, the mechanical revolution. Steam started to power everything from agriculture to textile manufacturing. It actually took over a century for everybody to adjust until the second big disruption, with the introduction of mass production and many scientific inventions like the combustion engine. That became the second industrial revolution. Another 70 years later, we experienced the third revolution. The digital age had begun with the invention of semiconductors, microchips, personal computing, and the internet as we know it today. But don't be fooled. Remember our first website in 1994? Changes take time, and adaptation to change takes even more time. And now we are facing the next step in disruption. The age of technology and data connectivity has begun once more to challenge us all. And the adaptation is going to take time because the pace is also increasing. Keep in mind, it took 75 years for 100 million people to adopt the telephone. It took Instagram 2 years. Pokemon Go, it only took 1 month to reach the same audience. This comparison, though, is not really fair, considering that in 1876, we were only about 1.5 billion people in the world. But it still tells us something. Customers are adapting faster and faster to new technologies, and their demand is changing so quickly on what they expect from their products. Established companies like the ones I worked for have a much harder time coping with this pace. And the bigger a company, the longer time it will take to adapt. Think about all the many processes in all the different areas and departments that it took so much time to polish and to improve. And now we're still at the beginning. And even though we as customers have gotten used to a faster pace, that doesn't mean we can force this upon our companies in the same speed. So how come that there still remains this itch, this nasty feeling that others still succeed better and quicker than yourself? Well, maybe now it's a good time to start talking about Peter. I follow Peter on Instagram. You might know him actually. Peter is the kind of guy that enjoys living the good life. He is traveling around the world. Wherever he goes, there's just sunshine, crazy beaches, snowy mountains, parties, breathtaking landscapes. I haven't seen a single picture of misery, failure, or even one rainy day in his feed. He has been to Cambodia, Japan, Iceland, Seychelles, Maldives, Mauritius, South Africa, Zanzibar, and so many other cool places. God, I envy him so much. But I tell you something, Peter and I are really close. So one day we spoke and I asked him, Peter, how is it possible that your life is so fantastic and all your travels so marvelous? What is your secret? And well, he answered, the only secret is that you only get to see what I want you to see. For example, I never told anyone that this cherry blossom tree in Tokyo was pretty much the only blossoming tree in the whole town, as we were actually a bit too early there in the year. It was pretty cold and we were freezing most of the time, and all of this because the flight tickets were cheaper. And I learned that there were many more stories of failure and mistakes, that he didn't put any pictures up. And let me tell you something, Peter is here today. He presented some fantastic use cases, shared his success stories, told you with a lot of pride on how to do things right, because he wanted to inspire you. And it's a good thing he does, but we have to take it with a pinch of salt. My point being, events like these are a bit like going to Instagram and seeing Peter's great pictures. We're just not looking at the full truth. So what should we be doing instead? First of all, start by not falling into the imposter syndrome trap, believing that you're a fake and will never succeed. Take a good look at the one sitting at your table and next to you. This does not work because you're not here actually, but well, go into the chat. Next time you start a conversation with somebody, don't just share your stories. Don't just share your success stories. Talk as much about your failures and struggles. A good conversation opener for tonight or the next event you go to might be, "Hi, how have you failed?" Or, "Hi, what are you struggling with?" Because believe me, we're all struggling with adapting to this new revolution, and will take a lot of time, patience, energy, and many more failures before we will all eventually get there. Second thing, don't follow the hysteria about needing to change everything overnight. It's not necessary. Take small baby steps. Start with single use cases and be smart about agile. Scrum doesn't solve all your problems, especially if the rest of the company still thinks in waterfall projects. Try to find a good balance. Gather some people around you. Don't try to do it alone. Look out for those that share your values, but who enhance your point of view by maybe having a different opinion. Fight for sponsorship, but try not to get involved in internal company politics. This is maybe the trickiest of all parts, as corporate management attempts to evolve in a much slower pace than the rest of the company. There's not one tool that solves everything. Think only one use case at a time. Accept the fact that you will probably never get to see the happy ending of what you might have started. Calm down, embrace your failures, and share them with others. And most important of all things, don't worry too much about Peter. Thank you very much.